Sorry, slow to get going this morning, but here we are. So, we're talking about why sticking to your zones is hard. Definitely harder than we think. You come in, you get the test done, you find out what your heart rate zones really should be, and it's like, okay, cool, I can do that. And then you get out there, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's that's really slow. Usually, is the thing. Like, oh my gosh, I can barely run, or I have to walk so much. Why is it so hard to stay in my zone? Really, really common. And so we want to talk about why that is and why that is so important and why we kind of need a mindset shift to help that be to really work. Um, yeah. Any thoughts on the opening statement?
I mean, I think it just a lot of I think the difficulty with this in general just comes from the kind of American mindset, right? Which is really good for some things, right? That sense of industry and productivity, but when it shows up in fitness, not always so great. And so it's that idea of like I've got to do more, I've got to go harder, faster, stronger, right? Um, and so like it's just really easy to bleed into doing more and more and more and more, thinking that it's going to be effective, even though it isn't long term, right?
Right.
Um,
Totally.
and so I think it's just, and we'll talk about this in that second point with reframing your mindset, but it just takes um, getting that kind of 30,000 foot view of what you're doing with your training, with your lifestyle, and make sure that it's working for you, right? So what we always tell people, I think we mentioned it on pretty much every call, is that the only training that matters is training that you can recover from. And so um, it's just being able to like manage your expectations for what training should look like and what it should be accomplishing, and kind of um, pushing back against some of maybe the conceptions that we've had around exercise that we've grown up with, right? So I mean, I know Cameron has told the story so many times of like learning as when he was in high school, playing sports and stuff, that running was a punishment, right? And so they'd like make them run super hard. And so it just, there's kind of paradigms like that we get taught in school, from coaches, from, friends, from other people, that ultimately like don't serve us in the long run. And so like, the message that we that we talk about is not super sexy, right? It's like run slow 80% of the time, and hit it with a high intensity 20% of the time. Like that's not exciting, that's not faddish, that's not like, it doesn't sound life changing, but really it is, right? Like exercising this way, learning to stick to it really is life changing. But like, I think also being realistic that it's super difficult to stick to it, that it's harder than than we thought it would be. Like being realistic about that is, I think, super important in doing something about it. Because if we're not realistic with ourselves and honest with how we're approaching exercise, what we're doing, then like we can't really change anything. Right?
Totally. Yeah. I think that's a key concept, right? That we have to kind of honor then those heart rate zones, um, because that is reality despite our perception. So unfortunately our bodies lie to us all the time, right? We think we feel pretty good today, right? Like heart and lungs feel great, my legs feel good, whatever, out on a run doing well, but my heart rate's high, and it's like, oh man, I wonder why my heart rate's a little high today. And if we keep pushing through that, our risk of problems really climbs. So honoring those heart rate zones and sticking to it, even when it seems like it doesn't make sense today, um, really is a problem. Uh, so Mark, you had a question for everybody, right? About that.
Yes. So, sorry. So I want to know what has been the hardest part, um, for each of you about trying to stay within your zones. Um, yeah, like,
Yeah.
or do you find it really easy? So if you find it like super easy to stay within your zones, drop one in the chat. if it's really hard for you to stay in in your zones, drop a two in the chat. And if you struggle to, I want to know why. Like what is it that kind of gets in the way of staying there? I know for me, awesome. Yeah. So see you typing. So we'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
I know for me, especially when I started uh, running slower, right, running within the zones, it was one, it wasn't my self-selected pace, so it felt a little bit awkward, right? Like I felt kind of gangly as
Mhm.
I was doing it. But two, like watching myself get passed up by person after person after person was super difficult. And I, I don't know if like maybe you guys had this experience, but like I remember this one time, like I was running. Well, this actually happened a couple times, but my heart rate will, I'll kind of run over the zone. So I'm like, okay, slow down, like start walking. And then I've had people like cheer me on, like, keep going, you can do it, right? Like not getting what I'm trying to do. And there's like this external cue of like, oh yeah, like I get, yeah, run faster, right? Like I have to, like, I was like, nope, like you don't have to run fast for this dude that's just like passing you on the thing. Like he doesn't know what you're doing with your training. Like stick to it. And so that's super hard. So let's see. Stacy, I'm always running at the high end of zone two. Yep, totally get that. Um, yep, feel like I have to watch my watch. Same thing. I don't know how you are, Cameron, but I'm like constantly. I'm like, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
I think over time I've definitely gotten better at kind of feeling effort wise where where I'm running at, but definitely it's still tough and it's super easy to just get back into that self-selected pace, right? And kind of get faster and faster and faster. Um,
Y- So
yeah,
that
yeah,
totally, I relate to all of those comments. So Christy, like, sometimes it's just too boring, which I totally get. Like because I grew up with the high intensity sports model, right? Like that's what I like to do. Um, I want to feel like I got a good workout in type of thing. We love self-flagellation. Like we like to beat ourselves up a little bit. And so, um, that definitely is kind of mindset wise more what I prefer. Um, but I understand now the benefits of staying slower, and so I do. And now I've actually come to appreciate and enjoy that because I can enjoy my runs. I can look around a little bit more and see the scenery and things like that. So I do enjoy that more. Um, and then Stacy always running at the top of zone two. I'm guilty of that all the time, and it causes me then to watch my watch. Like um, Spencer said, feeling like you have to watch your watch all the time. Yeah, that can be frustrating, but it is good because it does teach you kind of where your zones are at and what types of things. So you start to identify the patterns of like, oh, if I run halfway up this hill, even though I'm still in my zone two halfway up the hill, it makes it so that I can't get back into my zone two. Like it spikes up high and I can't get back into my zone two for a lot longer versus if I stop running at the bottom of the hill and then walk, I can stay in my zone two up the whole hill. And so you start to learn some patterns like that that help you to stay in there. Um, there was, I read a recent research article that talked about the difference between being at the edge of zone two and the middle of your zone two. And there is no performance benefit um, to riding that high end of your zone two. So um, you might as well make it easy and comfortable and burn fewer carb calories, and because you're burning about the same amount of fat anyway at either intensity. So a lot of the time it's a time issue for me when I feel like I just don't have enough time to go at that slower pace, and so I wind up picking it up a little bit. Um, so yeah, sometimes I run and wish I was high so I could slow down. um, why is my heart rate not high? That's funny. So that's a good thing that your heart rate's improving and things like that. Often that's when we want to retest is when you feel like, oh man, I have to work out harder and harder and harder to stay in my zone. That means your fitness is improving. So that's a good thing. But sometimes we do feel that like, oh, I just need a break. That's okay. If you feel like walking, take a walk. Um, that's okay to do sometimes. Um, really sometimes there's other reasons why your body's screaming at you to walk instead of keep running or to slow down a little bit. And so I would say listen to that when you can. Sometimes listening to our body though does send us false messages. We like to lie to ourselves a lot. And so sometimes we can push harder than we think, and then other times we feel like we're not pushing as hard, but really there's something going on in the background, like dehydration, heat, fatigue, lack of sleep, lack of nutrition, that makes our heart rate higher. And so honoring that really is going to help you avoid injury and avoid problems. So
Well,
it's a delicate
you
balance
know,
for sure.
that's what I love about heart rate though, is that like it's not going to lie to you. Um, and so, you know, I've had so many times, and Cameron's talked about this before, that I'll be watching my heart rate and I'm like, why is it so much higher than normal? And you think that I would like get this in my head by now, but I still apparently don't. But, I'll be like, why is it higher? What's going on? And then a day or two later, I just start feeling under the weather, right? So we'll see changes in our heart rate show up before we feel some of the physical changes or some of the things that are happening. What is that?
Oh, that sound? Sorry. I was inflating something while I'm off camera.
um, your camera's definitely still on.
Oh, is it? Oh, you can see me?
Yep.
That's funny.
Yep.
Oh.
That's
Anyway,
hilarious.
go ahead. Oh, I just
Um,
can't see me on mine. Aha. Funny. I'm inflating
that's
something.
hilarious. That's hilarious. But so, it's this balance of taking the data and then also listening to our body. And so I think, we might feel good, but our heart rate's just doing something wonky, right? Like for sure, check the heart rate strap, like make sure you have a good connection, make sure, your battery's in, like make sure that there's enough contact and moisture on the strap. But definitely like it's better to honor that and slow down if your heart rate's going crazy. But then there might also be days that your heart rate's totally normal and you're just not feeling it, right? Like something feels off, right? Or it's feeling harder than normal. Like that's one where you're not, you might not just push through and be like, okay, well, my heart rate's normal. I'm going to go through. Like that might be a day that you still take it easy because your body was telling you something different. And so it's kind of balancing the data that you're getting from the heart rate strap with what your body's telling you. But, with that data, we're just trying to overcome some of the ways that our body lies to us, right? Or those days that it's like super hard to get out of bed and actually get on the trail, right? I get more of those days in the winter. So Christy said,
Totally.
I can confirm the fat burn is working with zone 2. That's awesome. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so this is such a great point. And it goes back to that idea of honoring the zones is what we're interested in here is the long game, right? Like this is a 6-month comparison. And so like some of the day-to-day differences might be frustrating, or it might feel really good to run at the top of zone 2 or even to zone 3, right? That's what most of our self-selected paces tend to be more in zone 3, and you just like it just feels good. But what ends up happening in the long run is that like we end up burning more um, carbohydrate than fat, and so it means we're hungry. It means we have to eat back more of those calories. Um, and so it's just like when I honor my zones, when I stay more in that mid-range, what I'm really doing is giving a gift to my future self. And that's hard to do, right? Because in our brains, we see our future self as a different person, right? Like we're not super connected to that. Um, and so it has to be a conscious choice that we're like, all right, like I know future self a lot of times I'm just a super jerk, right? Like future me doesn't always love past me. But if we can in this way give that gift to our future self and stay within our zones, honor those, then we're going to see some of those results that we're looking for. We'll recover better. We'll have more energy to give, like we talked about, to those high intensity efforts, and we'll just feel better because our body is um, getting kind of tuned up. We're building that base so that it can handle more of the things that we throw at it on a day-to-day basis.
Totally. And I think that is such an important thing that we keep that balance so that we can, go more frequently. We burn more calories the more often we exercise, but it's the fact that we exercise too hard too often is why we can't. And so being able to just reframe that mindset of why we're exercising and being able to take that 30-year approach instead of living that healthy lifestyle, that mindset switch is the big difference maker. Um, over time. And so it is tricky to like figure out the zones and how to make that work and stay in them and stuff like that. But again, the point is to really make it so that your whole life and lifestyle are more active. So, burning yourself up during your workouts, if that makes you less active for the rest of the day, what's really the point of that? Yeah. So Stacy's mentioning that she feels like she has to run fast before it'll get in zone two sometimes. Um, but yeah, it does give you a structure. So it's interesting how it does fluctuate from day to day. Sometimes our heart rate is slower on some days, maybe better sleep or whatever, and then other days it's pretty high. But honoring that really does allow you to get the best possible workout for how you're feeling today, or how your body's doing today, whether you're feeling that way or not. And so it surprises me all the time. This morning my heart rate was a lot lower than I would have thought, which was great. And so I was able to enjoy that on my run this morning. Um, so every day is a little bit of an adventure, but that kind of tracks with life, where we're on kind of this roller coaster of life. One of the things, though, that I see um, in people stalling out and not making progress is that they don't, for the 20% of the time, their heart isn't quite hard enough. And so that's where we're going to really see forward progress too, is that, we talk 80-20 all the time. And so just like you need to stay low enough in your low zone, you do need to go high enough in your high zone that it pushes progress, that it makes you get more fit. And so that can be hard to do too. And that's something that I leave out too often in my workouts, because I try to get that in other, areas of fitness or activities that I like to do. But it's not quite the same as training those, because like doing the high intensity in a basketball game is great, but if I haven't done that in my training enough, my injury risk in the basketball game is going to be a lot higher. And so we've got to train those higher intensity bouts so that we have the ability to handle that increase in intensity. Um, yeah, how your body feels versus how you feel, Stacey. It's so true. Um, right. So Shannon said during our run this morning that hers was a little bit higher than normal, so we didn't really match well this morning. When normally we're actually pretty in sync, so our heart rates are way, way different in terms of
Oh,
the actual number, but our heart rate, like our relative heart rate, is usually pretty in sync for the most part. I can usually climb hills better without my heart rate going quite as high. My heart rate stays higher coming down hills, and hers will drop way, way low coming down a hill. So I don't know if I hold my breath or whatever. It's kind of funny. Um, but yeah, your how we feel, because often because we're in good shape, your legs and your lungs feel great. You don't feel like you're breathing that terribly hard, and your legs have enough strength to do it, so you feel fine. But the problem comes in that, yeah, you're fighting off a cold, like Mark talked about, or other things like that, and so um, you don't realize that you're not feeling well because you're not feeling poorly yet. And so those things can catch up. Or you didn't get adequate sleep, but you just woke up, so your gas tank's as full as it's going to be, so you feel like you have enough in the tank now, but then it depletes you for the rest of the day. And so that's where listening to your heart rate will reflect how much sleep you got or other things, so that you can honor that, like we talked about, better. So those really are the big keys of like understand your zones, know where they are, right? So that's where the testing comes in and why we love to do that. But once you've figured that out, honoring those zones, reframing your mindset of why you're in that zone, right? Why you need to be high in your zones to improve performance, improve your metabolism, be able to burn more calories, be able to, increase in fitness and stave off the plateau and then the eventual decline as we age and things like that. That's where that high intensity really bears out, is in defying aging. But then the other 80%, we're just slow and steady, hanging out in the middle of our zone two if we can, and just enjoying the reason why we're exercising. Like this is me putting in time to take care of myself. This is me putting in time to be able to do all the other things that I love in life and enjoy it. And so that's really what that time is about. Um, and that mental reframe, it can be really helpful in like making your workouts work for you. And then yeah, like I said, when it's time to work, you got to work hard. You got to push when it's time to push so that you can make that progress. Um, Me resting heart rate averages 48 beats per minute. When I'm sick, it usually runs around 50. Yeah, it is fun to track. Yeah, when you're not feeling as well, your resting heart rate. So heart rate variability is actually an interesting thing to track. To be able to see from a day-to-day basis kind of where you're at. So there's a couple different metrics with heart rate variability, but yeah, even just seeing where your resting heart rate is from day to day, is really helpful. Can let you know, like, oh man, I may be dehydrated. So you kind of have to think about it. What could this be? If I woke up and I look at my watch and it says my resting heart rate's higher, why is that? Is that inadequate sleep, inadequate hydration? Is it stress? Is it you know, ate a bunch of pizza the last 2 days like I have? Um, Things like that, that lots of salt, things that increase your blood pressure or heart rate. So yeah, all kinds of stuff that can affect that. And so tracking those things and finding those trends so you can learn that for your body is really important. So those are some of those exercises that we do with people where we have you track um, different things. So stress, sleep, your meals, other things helps you to identify those patterns. And so journaling really can be helpful in identifying days where we're more sad and what those triggers might be that trigger that sadness. And so we can meet that earlier and maybe avoid some of those things that trigger that or whatever, so that we can see in our heart rate and in our lives how we can adjust to get the most bang for our buck out of our health and fitness efforts. So hopefully that was helpful to go over the heart rate stuff. I know it's always a bit of a learning curve when you start out with it. We've got some high performers here, so on the call today that have done a really good job with sticking to it and honoring their zones, and so they're seeing some good results. Christy mentioned that her body fat percentage is coming down and the visceral fat's coming down, even though weight on the scale hasn't changed a ton, which is always frustrating when that happens because we think that's what we want when really it's the other aspects of life is really what we want, that we can live the way we want to live and do what we want to do. And we've talked about that before, how we often lose that visceral fat, so the fat around our organs and things like that, before. And the intramuscular fat is another one, the fat that kind of marbles our muscles, like a roast. um, we lose that typically before we will lose our like, I look a little fluffy puffy fat, right? That miracle coating that we all seem to get in our 30s, 40s over our abs. That's like, wait, what? What's going on there? Um, and so that's those changes. That's awesome when you can see those types of things, because that means overall you're much healthier, and you see that in what you can do. And so eventually the weight on the scale comes off and catches up with that, but it's a slow process. But like our call yesterday or Tuesday, it has to be a slow process. That's It's important that it's a slow process because it allows us to make those lifestyle changes, to troubleshoot things and see for our life and lifestyle what's really going to help. It allows you to get used to training in your zone and to reframe your mindset of exercise not being a punishment. So you don't have to stop and start and yo yo so much, that it can become more a part of who you are and what you do. And this lifestyle of just being more generally active. Um, and that allows you to really enjoy fitness instead of it being a punishment. It allows you to enjoy and appreciate what your body can and can't do instead of beating yourself up for looking a certain way or feeling a certain way. Um, yeah, sticking to the long term, the 30-year plan of I want to be able to exercise and move and do the things I want to do when I'm 85. Um, that I think is a better focus than weight on the scale or other things, and keeps you more motivated and keeps you going more than a moving target as much as weight on the scale can be. That just leads to frustration that feeling of failing all the time that really depresses us and takes us off track. So yeah, like I said, hopefully those were helpful messages. If you didn't quite catch the whole thing or you want to go back and listen to it later, we have podcasted now all of the group calls that we've done so far. So they're all in Zenler. So if you go into the group calls course, so that mini course or those modules there, if you look down at the bottom, there are the audio files. So at the very bottom, they're still organized by the main topics, so the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday topics. And so you can go, they're all labeled by date and you can listen to them like a podcast. So you can listen to them anytime you want and do that while you're doing the dishes or on your run or whatever else. If you've missed some of the topics that you want to catch up on. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Mark, any final thoughts, closing comments, words of wisdom?
I would just say, like, if you have any questions about your zones or ways to kind of stay in them better or any strategies, like, definitely send us a message in Geneva. Like, we get that it can be super challenging. And just reiterating, like, in the end, remember, like, what the purpose of exercising this way is, right? Like, you know, definitely it will leave us feeling better now, but it's really about that long game, right? That 30-year plan, so that in our, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like, we're still able to do the things that we love. Like, exercise trends and fads will come and go, but these are fundamental principles based on how our bodies work, right? How they adapt over time. And exercising in this way and honoring those zones is the best way to stay healthy now and in the future, right? It lowers your risk for all sorts of different things. And so, yeah, like, we want to bring you the best of what's going to keep you healthy, what's going to leave you feeling good. And so, like I said, if you have any questions about any of these things ever, you know, or you think it's time to update your zones, like, let us know, and we'll be happy to help.
Yep. We're always here to support in any way we can. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining the call, and we will catch you on the next one. Yeah, today's Thursday, so Monday, we got another great call coming up. We'll see you then.